Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week.
We sure are.
And we're very lucky today. We have Dr. Susan Barnes back with us. She was with us on episode 114, where we talked about spirit art. And today we're going to talk about Edgar Cayce and the difference between psychic mediums and spirituality. And so I think this will be a very interesting topic for everybody to listen to, including us. So welcome back.
And if you have any questions, please join in.
All right.
So, the first thing I usually start with, because, so many people use the word psychic and they use the word medium, and they don't define it. So they don't really tell you, what they mean by those terms. So I'm very clear. My concept of mediumship comes from the Spiritualist National Union and the Spiritualist National Churches, NSAC, National Association of Spiritualist Churches. There we go. There it is. So it comes from those two groups, which are what I kind of call the more orthodox types of spiritualism, where they're much more strict with their spiritualism. So their definition of mediumship is that mediumship, for the purpose of it, is to be able to connect with discarnate beings on the other side, bring back information from those individuals and present it to the receiver so that the receiver understands and knows that their loved one is still alive on the other side.
Okay.
And this is important because spiritualism is known as a science, a religion, and a philosophy, and it is the scientific part of spiritualism which is giving the evidence of the people in the afterlife. So the two kind of work together. And this is why, especially if you see a lot of British mediums work, they're very much interested in the evidence, because the evidence is much more important to them than the message. See, evidence is what really brings about the science of spiritualism. So they will give us, sometimes they'll go through, some teachers teach with shopping lists of stuff like, ask the spirit world, when did you die? What did you do? How did you live? What did you look like? This kind of whole shopping list of what was your career, a list of things that they ask the spirit world so they can identify it for the recipient. In contrast, and in deep contrast to that, the Cayce work is much more about developing your own personal spirituality, developing your psychic skills, not only for yourself, but for people around you. It's really viewed as a service, so that you are providing a service to yourself and others. Now, I read a very interesting thing in the last transcript of the Cayce work, where he had a conversation with medium Eileen Garrett, who used to be a well-known British medium. And the two of them went into trance together, and Cayce gave her a reading. And what was interesting was at the very end of the reading, he said, "Don't look to the dead, look to the living." So that to me was very profound, because it made me think that instead of communicating, going and saying, "Oh, I want to get this deceased relative," it was like, no, it was making me think, I want to communicate with the life force. That I want to be more with the life force than I am with people in heaven or people that I know that have passed. And with this, Cayce himself would go into trance, and he would acknowledge the Akashic records. He would sometimes, occasionally, I've heard he got spirit guides through, occasionally, but most of the time he was going through the Akashic records, and he was getting information about an individual that would help them medically, that could help them professionally, that could help them in their life right now. And of course, a lot of these readings brought in past life types of experiences. For example, today there's a lot of people who come back to the earth who used to live in Egyptian times or Atlantean times. So, and if you look at the history, we're kind of paralleling some of the things that went on in Atlantis before its final disruption today in our culture. So he was working very differently. So when you go to the Akashic records, the messages that you get, because I just did this in a class, we actually did get some past life messages for people. So we get all kinds of messages. We get all kinds of healing messages. We get past life messages. Sometimes a relative comes through and brings a message, but it's a very different orientation. So it's more like what I call a soul to soul type of reading than it is a mediumship reading, if
Okay.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I think it's neat to hear that too, that when you go into the Akashic records like that you can get that other information in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of like a slightly different level of it. Cayce didn't bother with the deceased spirits as much. He called it the borderland. You know, spiritualists call it the summerland. But Cayce's borderland is not exactly like the Summerland, because the Summerland is really more like heaven, where the borderland is both heaven and people that are earthbound.
Okay.
So one of the things Cayce was very aware of was that we might not want to contact every spirit.
Probably
So
not.
no, we do need to discriminate.
Right?
Right, right. So he had, of course, his protection. His prayers are very much very positive. And, you know, as I sit in the light of the divine presence, please help my energy work with only the highest and the best to show thy will of God through me. And it was all through the person, which is interesting too. It wasn't as if you would go up to a spirit guide and say, give me the information. Or many people, when they do the sitting in the power meditation, they're going up and trying to bring the spirit world into them. This is the opposite. This is where you're working on your own individual self so that your spirit, your soul, reaches up to them and merges with them. And of course, he very much said that this couldn't happen unless the God forces wanted it to happen. So it has to be a cooperative thing between the individual and the God force to bring through the messages.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true.
And similar to spiritualism, where spiritualism has their 7 principles on the way you should live your life, Cayce also believed very much in the type of life you lived and the type of life you tried to atone to, because he really wanted us to be our divine best, to put it that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, to be the best we possibly can. And he comes up, there's a book called, what is it, 12, to remember, the 12 Steps to Edgar Cayce's Personal Development. And it was written by someone else. And it tells you step by step his process. And things start with, for example, one of the first things is intent. What is your intent? Why do you want to reach the spirit world? You know, are you doing it because you want money? That's not a good motive. Are you doing it because you want to serve? So if it's in the eyes of service, then you're working in a positive way, and that you'll be more successful with your psychic types of work that you do. So he did do a lot of readings about the psychic work. He talks about it very deeply. He talks about the consciousness. He talks about how, of course, he himself, when he did it, was in a very deep state of trance. I call it trance, deep state of deep altered state. Yeah, I'll put it that way. Deep altered state. And I mean, he didn't remember, of course, he didn't remember anything that he spent, you know, in the messages. But of course, when we do the mediumship, we are always in a slightly altered state if we're receiving the information correctly. And of course, the information is coming through our subconscious mind, it's coming through our right brain into our mind and then into the conscious mind. In some cases, I know when I'm working, I'll be saying things, but it won't totally register in my conscious mind. I'm just saying what the spirit said. I won't remember. So people come back and say, "What did you say?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know."
Right? I have no idea. It wasn't for me, that message, right?
That's right. That's
That's
right.
how we've always thought of it, is like that message isn't for me. So once it's gone, it's kind of gone, you know? It's
Yeah.
Exactly.
if you maybe talk about it after the reading, you might pull some things back in, but yeah, I like how you said with the intent, because I think that's so much of it, that we need to look where we're coming from when we're doing that kind of work.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And prayer is very, very important. Coming up with your own prayer. And I know my prayers usually they start by addressing a deity. They talk about, could be God, could be the super consciousness, could be infinite intelligence, whatever your belief is, great spirit, whatever your belief in the deity is, you address that and you ask to serve. That's another thing that I think that's important when you're doing Cayce kinds of works, is to say, please help me to serve. Instead of saying, please bring it to me or please give it to me. It's please help me to be a better channel, to be a better vessel for your messages.
Yes.
Yeah. So that I think is another important thing that's good to know. But I mean, the intent, absolutely, absolutely critical. You have to have faith too. I mean, I know you probably know this as well. I mean, when you get up in front of 300 people like you do in Lilydale at the Stump, and you've got to give messages, you have to have faith that those messages are coming. You know, you can't second guess yourself. Just have to really
True. That's hard sometimes.
Oh, I know, not easy, you know. But before I go up there, I'm always like, I know, Spirit, you're going to come give me the messages. You're going to be here with me. And they've never failed me. I mean, they've never failed me. If you ask that, they will receive. So those are just some key tips that I think are important for all mediums to do. And certainly before you do a reading, set your intent, you know, get yourself in a peaceful place.
Yeah.
You know, if you've had a busy, upsetting day, maybe you don't want to do a reading right then, you know, so you've got to be in a good frame of mind. And we always know that thoughts are things. So we want our thoughts to always be as positive as possible. One of the things I never do, I know people get really concerned about protection. I need to protect myself against this or protect myself against that. But you see, I don't believe in saying that, because if I say I'm going to protect myself against evil spirits, I've just alerted the evil spirits. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah, they've been alerted. So, no, I don't say that. I just, the highest, the best, the good for all mankind, all of these things are the types of things that you want to say when you're working and when you're thinking and in your everyday life, too. I mean, the more positive you can be, the better off you're going to be in your life, the better off your readings are going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, with protection, when you do the prayer and you put your intention out there, you're kind of asking for that there anyways, right? Because
Exactly.
once you're whatever you want to call your deity or your higher council or whatever, once they all come in, you have that protection from them. So, you know,
Right.
yeah.
You know, and the other thing I am noting to people, you can't really do alcohol or drugs.
No, no.
No, you can't, because the substances bring in negative energies. whether you want to or not, they tend to attract that. So definitely don't do either one of those. I know sometimes it's hard. I want to have a drink, and it's like, no, gonna do messages, gonna work tonight, can't drink.
Yeah.
Later. You get to celebrate later.
Celebrate later. Exactly right. Exactly right. So, yeah, but the alcohol does attract some negative types of things. The other thing that was very clear is that I think this is an important point too. A lot of people get confused. They think that, like, when you go into a trance state, the spirit is taking over your body. That's not true. The spirit does not take over your body. It is a blending process. The mediums know that as well. It's purely a blending process of you blending your mind, your unconscious mind, with the spirit world or the spirit mind or the super universal consciousness, whatever you want to perceive that to be. So it's a blending of the two. It's definitely not any kind of possession, as people get concerned about that. No, I've had people say to me, oh yeah, they come and they possess you. And I'm like, no, they don't.
Well, that would be a terrible thing. And I don't think that there would be many mediums out there if that was so.
That's true too.
Right.
But
And it feels like almost like when you go into a hypnosis kind of thing, right? You're sort of
right.
in that altered state, but you still have your free will. So I feel like, I don't know, I've never particularly been in a trance, but I feel like if you are in a trance, that you still have that little bit of free will in there that you can pull yourself out if that was not sitting comfortably with you.
Well, I mean, it's like they say when they hypnotize people, they can't make them do something they fundamentally don't want to do.
Yeah.
You can't go against that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's a blending, and the blending can be so complete that the spirit actually can move your body. But it's not because they're in your body, it's because they're working with your subconscious mind to move your body. That makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
It
that
does.
does make sense.
no, but I think that's an important point because people get confused.
Yes, and scared, right? So then they're
Yes.
afraid to try these things because it's like, if they hear all these myths out there, then how do they, want to go in and practice something like this where they maybe can connect? And I think, where you were saying with like the alcohol and drugs and things like that, yeah, it's not a good mix at all.
No, it's not.
No, it's
Never.
not. Never.
No.
And yeah, I mean, we do. I know the other thing that people say too is that when you're doing trance work, you shouldn't do it alone. You should always have somebody there. But the reality is that if you go into a trance state and you're alone, the worst thing that will happen is you'll fall asleep.
I was just going to say that. You'll have a good rest.
You'll have a good rest, yeah. But meditation is very much part of the Cayce work and an important part for everyone's own personal spirituality. The meditation, of course, is to try to just clear your mind as much as you can, get rid of all the everyday crazy type of stuff that's going on in your life, and just try to find a really peaceful place to put your mind. And that's when the spirit world will come in and communicate with you.
Yes, I think sometimes we try too hard. Like I know for myself, sometimes when I'm trying to connect and get messages and things like that, I know I'm trying too hard. I'm forcing it. So I'm not obviously at that point coming from a good spot to be getting those messages because I have come in with not the right intention of, here I am to serve and give me your messages. Because I do get messages, just sometimes you try too hard.
Yeah, you can't try too hard. And that brings up another point. You have to be patient. Really need some patience. You can't just go to a weekend workshop on mediumship and come out of it thinking you're a medium.
No,
That
it's
is so
and
true.
it's practice, right? Like you
Yeah, it's practice.
practice.
And it's the same thing. You can't go into a weekend workshop and come out and say you're a trance medium. You know, it doesn't work that way. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of time and a lot of patience and yeah, a lot of work on your part to be able to have the stamina and the, you know, the stamina, the confidence, the strength to be able to follow through and actually do the work. And if
Yes.
you don't do the work, it's not gonna happen.
So when you do it, or do your thoughts, do you feel like when you're practicing the mediumship and doing these things like the different meditation and the intention and prayer and things like that, is this like something, if this is something you want to be, you would do every single day, multiple times a day, or like what's your thoughts on that as far as if somebody wanted to go delve into that and enhance
Well,
it?
I mean, you need some kind of a meditative practice almost every day. But Casey said it doesn't even have to be that long. I mean, it could just be every so often, just sitting down, clearing your mind, calming yourself, and clearing away the thoughts. Now, for me, it's interesting. I'm doing Edgar Cayce also had all kinds of medical treatments. There's a lot of books on the medical remedies that he recommended. And I started doing one of those medical treatments about 16 days ago. And so now what I do is the treatment's half an hour. So during that time, I meditate. So he suggested that that's what you do because then I'm hooked up to it's putting a slight electrical charge to my body. But I use that time as my quiet time to meditate.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I do, you know, I do practice too. You have to,
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I know it's hard. Sometimes it's hard. I couldn't find a time during the day to like find. I tried it in the morning, tried it in the evening. It never kind of worked. But this is now that I'm doing this ritual of the wet cell battery. I'm being religious about it. I'm there every day, close to the same time in the evening, not exactly the same time that I'm doing it. So I'm being much better.
Yes. Well, and it's hard. It is hard because it's like anything, right? It's something that we don't make the time for. And I know, like with mom, she does her exercising, and that's kind of her time where she clears her mind. And, that's sort of she's not a sit down and meditate, but she
Yep.
is right, can clear her mind. So that works, right? Because we can't all just sit and meditate. For myself, I journal in the morning and then I do a short meditation just to kind of clear myself for the day to go out into the world. And then I find that just it changes my perspective on what the world is when I'm going out into it, when I do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just
Okay. I also find that before I do a reading, what I do is I do my chakra system. I like to ground myself up and down to get my chakra system totally in line. And then I'll call on my spirit guides and whatnot to come in and help me out at that point. But I really do find the doing the chakras works for me. And but I'm really interested in how you do your electrical charge.
Well, I'll tell you, this treatment is for what? Muscular dystrophy, multiple. So I did it for multiple sclerosis, but it is the MS treatment, and it's there's a bunch of other ailments. He's got two devices. He's got this radioactive box type of thing that he uses, and he's got the wet cell, and I'm using the wet cell, and it's really interesting because it is this battery. It has no on-off switch. Your body is what generates the electricity, which I find really, really interesting. So you put it on two specific points on your body, and then you sit there for half an hour. And what it's doing is I'm using a gold solution, a solution that's gold in it, and it's putting gold into my body. because Cayce said that with MS, one of the things people were lacking is gold.
Okay.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So it puts gold into your body to help you. And I have to say, it started working immediately. I mean, I know I was like very, very happy. So I'm very pleased with it. I will continue to do it.
Yeah, that's exciting. And it's always nice when you can find these things where you're like, I love when you can find things that you're working with your own body's energy and doing this to heal your body. So I think that's really a neat thing.
Yeah.
And actually, I know someone, so I'm going to actually pass on that information to them.
Well, there's lots of information about the Cayce remedies. There's a bunch of remedies. The other one is what apple cider vinegar and honey for colds and things like that, and that works very well too. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
got a bunch. I'm trying to think. Those are the two that are pretty common.
Yeah.
And you can, well, I mean, look it up online. The other thing is that if you do join the Edgar Cayce Center, which is here in Virginia Beach, which is where I am now, you will have access to all of his readings. So
Oh,
when you go to the database, you can go to the database and search topics.
Okay.
Now, what the Cayce Center's also done is they put together the books of the Cayce readings on a particular topic. For example, there's 5 books on the readings that have to deal with multiple sclerosis. And I've read 3 of them so far. I got a lot of extra information out of those because the other part of it is diet. Diet is very important. Wow.
right.
That's interesting. And I mean, how advanced was he ahead of his time, right? Like for, you know, now that we look at it and we're becoming more open to some of this stuff, that's great that there is these teachings out there for people to follow along with and dive into.
Yeah, and they're finding a lot of the things he said was correct. So he's been proven on many times, and they do case studies to try to prove the medical things worked. But some of the cures are all definitely homeopathic types of cures, or some manipulation of the body, a lot of massage, things like that. And they work. They work. I mean, he helped a lot of people. A lot of people. I mean, it's amazing. I know he was told to stop doing some readings and he didn't. He just kept going and going and going, which I think probably ended his life a little earlier than it had to.
Yeah.
But, and there's a lot of people that have put together like the historical information. There's historical information that he did about Egypt, about Atlantis, about these different civilizations, and people have taken the readings and put them into books to explain the different areas to people, and very detailed stuff. I mean, very detailed stuff. I mean, the Egyptian stuff is what I'm studying now too. It is very complete. I mean, he's talking about the temples they had and how the temples worked, and talked about what happened when the Atlanteans left Atlantis because it sunk and they came over to Egypt, and the influence of the Atlanteans on the Egyptians and all of these different things. So it's quite complete.
Oh, wow. And that's all, you can get all of that through that Edgar Cayce Center then, all that information?
All that information is there. If you go on, there's tons of books by all kinds of different people on all
Okay.
these different topics. The other thing is, if you join the Cayce Center, they also have something called study groups. So that there are study groups. I'm in a study group right now studying the psychic readings that he did. What did he say about psychic phenomena? Which is how I've gotten this information. And again, what struck me as the key thing was service, being of service, and also personal spirituality. focusing on your own personal spirituality so that you're able to communicate with these higher levels of consciousness. So that I think is very, very important. It doesn't get stressed enough when people think about mediumship. Oh, I'm going to go be a medium. I'm going to go give messages to people. No, it's really with your own personal development.
Yeah. So what do you think would be the first step if somebody wanted to kind of delve into becoming a medium and doing that? Is it doing some soul searching, so to speak, and finding yourself and, like you said, your spirituality and how you want to serve yourself before you even get into it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the book, I think there's 12 steps to personal spirituality, gives you a very good roadmap of the things to think about on how to prepare yourself. So yeah, I don't think people prepare themselves enough to be able to do this kind of work. So it is a service, and you have to remember that it's not a profession per se. Some make it a profession, but first and foremost, it's a service that you're doing for the spirit world, and that has to be respected. But you have to be respected too. You have to really have yourself in line with the right attitude and the right ideas to do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that book really gives you the basic steps, step by step. As I said, intention is one, and patience is another. I'm trying to remember them all.
That's the hard one.
Oh, the other one.
That is the one I struggle with the patience. It's like,
I know.
no, I want it now.
Oh, another one is you have to open the door. And when I say open the door, again, you don't open the door up to anything. I think one of the problems that people have, especially if they discover their psychic abilities after some type of a tragedy in their life or a death in their family, all of a sudden they realize they have these psychic abilities and they go around sensing, everything they can possibly sense. And, oh, there's a spirit, let me go contact the spirit. No, you don't want to do that. You want to be discerning about who you contact and what you contact.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah. And I
You
think we
bet.
talked about the last time we talked to you was, right, you can't just constantly be on all the time.
Oh.
I mean, right, because you can't go do things. You can't, like you just said, you're picking up on everything, and that's not good for us either, mentally or physically.
I know.
No, it drains us terribly. Yeah.
Yeah. It just and you don't have a life. I mean, you have to kind of separate your physical life from your spiritual life in some ways,
Yeah.
So
You
not that
really do. You really truly do.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I think that's good. And I mean, that book, I think, would be a really helpful book for people to dive into. And I think I will probably get it because
I'm going to get it too.
because I think there's a lot of information to delve into, whether you're starting out new or you're continuing on with your practice, reminders and those kind of things with it.
No, it is, yeah. And again, we're all constantly growing and changing. And now, because of my influence with his work, my mediumship is going to be changing. I can tell, because as I'm trying to now, when I'm meditating, trying to reach the Akashic records, I am starting to get past life types of images and historical types of images that I never used to get before.
Hmm.
And, I'll get colors, meditate, I'll get beautiful, beautiful colors and things. So yeah, it brings it up on a different level.
That's really neat. Yeah. Well, so you probably will offer some other services then than what you do now, do you think? Or
Well, I mean, I'm looking at incorporating this into my teaching much more so. As I said, I did for Lilydale earlier this week, I did the first course on Edgar Cayce inspired psychic development. And as I'm doing it, I'm now starting to hopefully do it at the Cayce Center and work with the Cayce Center more. I'm trying to develop exercises. I've just gotten the first few exercises that I came up with, but it's things like Cayce also very much believes it's just the senses. You get all this information through your different senses, touch, tap, whatever. And so making people aware of their senses and trying to get information that way as well is another part of the exercises that I'll be working on and trying to develop.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. So if you had a final thought for everybody, what would it be?
Look to the living, not to the dead.
I love that. Yeah, I'm probably going to quote that when I post this. I'm probably going to quote that because I think that's a wonderful, wonderful message for everybody.
It is, and I think it's really an important one to know.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's been a real pleasure getting to talk with you again. So we really appreciate you taking the time with us. And can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes. You can get me at my email is spiritartgallery, one word, at gmail.com. And my website is the Spirit Art Gallery.net, not com.
Perfect. I will put those into the show notes. And again, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it. And I know our followers are going to love it. So
yeah, they definitely are. And come back and join us again, please, when you get into your next program of what you're doing. You're always but it's always a pleasure, very much so.
Yeah, well, I haven't even gotten into the historical stuff yet.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I think that would be an interesting one. That interests me, like to look at some of the ancient civilizations and things like that. So once you start getting more into that, we'd love to have you back and you
absolutely.
Tell us all what you've learned.
Well, thank you so very, very much. It's so kind of you. God bless you.
Yes, you as well. Okay, take care.
You're a sweetheart. Thank you. Bye.